Hello and welcome back to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech and more into one place. I'm Dave Rome, and I'm getting a little bit sick of that intro. Who's joining me this week?
I'm Ronan McLaughlin, leader of the Four Masters Cycling Club Summer League after one round of racing.
You keep blowing me away with your intros.
And I'm Zach Edwards of Boulder Gruppetto.
Hello both. Good to see you both again.
Hello.
As usual, bumper episode. There's quite a bit to get through. We've also got a new voice that'll join us at some point in the episode, which is our new recruit out of the US, Josh Weinberg. And he'll jump on to talk us through some of the latest in tech that that he has specifically seen, and then plus a little bit that's coming out of the US.
Did you discuss the gravel disc wheel?
I think we actually very briefly discussed a gravel disc wheel, but only marginally because I don't think I wanted to discuss a gravel disc wheel.
I've heard it has a 26mm inner rim width.
I'm hearing this. Yes, I'm hearing it's mostly like a fairing based wheel, right? Like it's.
I mean, that's all of
pretty traditional
head,
spokes underneath.
All of head's discs are like that.
Yeah, so it might actually ride just fine. But anyway, well, before we get to all that gravel talk toward the end of the episode, there is plenty to get through. But before we do any of that, I guess we have a little bit of a corrections corner, which is last week we're talking about Vittoria's new Corsa Pro in a 29mm width, specifically for wide road rims, like 25mm internal with hookless wheels. And this 29mm tire is to let those wheels be basically the narrowest tire you can while being UCI compliant. We weren't sure. We didn't have the information at the time as to whether this was a truly unique tire, and we sort of Ronan, I think you said there's no chance it would be just a rebadged tire, but we didn't have specifics. But I can confirm that it is a unique casing and a unique tread cap just to that tire.
I'm not sure if we said that on air.
We just weren't sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just this was key information that wasn't in the press release of what did you actually do differently.
To preempt next week's correction corner, Dave, you just said it was for 25mm internal with hookless rims, but there are also hooked and mini hooked 25mm inner rims, which this tire would also be the right or ISO compliant size for.
Yes, correct. Anyway, there you go. A little bit of a small corrections corner, but let's get on to the big headline story of this episode. It's actually been something that's on my mind, and I apologize to listeners that may have heard me rant about this same topic before. What's been on my mind lately, and I guess it came off the back of being told that Cannondale Smart Sense is still featured on some bikes when I thought it had gone away. It's basically that, specifically in the endurance road bike sector, but the conversation expands beyond that. What's been on my mind is unique selling features in bikes that actually disparage purchases. Cannondale Smart Sense I'd put on that list. I'd put this is gonna get spicy. I'd put Trek ISO Speed on that list. I'd put Specialized Future Shock on that list, and other integrated electronics in some bikes. And then adding to that list a new feature, internal frame storage done badly. So good for internal frame storage, great. But poor execution, not so good. That's on my mind. Thoughts?
I want to jump on there just quickly before we get started, because you said unique selling features that disparage sales. And I mean, the whole point of these things is, they're a unique selling point. And as such, they're supposed to encourage sales. So that you're kind of... You're giving us your take on these straight away in the intro there, I guess. You don't think these are... Yeah, it's interesting that the more features we add that are designed to be points of interest to a bike, your take is that actually they're a reason not to buy these bikes.
I think so. So I guess where I'm coming from with this is I see a lot of older generation cyclists, at least in Sydney, that just want a road bike. And they've historically ridden or chosen a race bike, but now they're being told by their bike fitter or by the shop, you really do need to get yourself an endurance fitting road bike, taller stack, shorter reach. And they look in the market and they really want that Specialized Tarmac or an Athos or a Trek Madone or whatever it is. They really want that bike, but the geometry is ill-suited to them and they'd have to run a stem upright and it would look atrocious. And so they start looking at lightweight, pure road bikes that are in this endurance sector, and you start making up the list, and you can cross off the bikes that would naturally think of, like Cannondale Synapse, fantastic, but it has the smart sense that adds unnecessary weight and cost. Specialized Roubaix has unnecessary weight and cost through Future Shock. Trek Domane, really heavy for its category because of the ISO speed in the rear that doesn't actually do that much now that they've also have a D-shaped C-post that does most of the comfort there. And it has big chunky tires. And these people are looking, the conversations I have is these people are like, I don't need 40 mil tire clearance and I don't need these comfort inducing features. I just want a road bike that fits me. And I want to run like 30 to 32 mil tires, road gearing, and I just want a normal bike.
The question I have is like, why is it that these features seem to be added to these types of endurance bikes? And I think, well, it originally stems from the fact that many of these bikes evolved from what teams would have used for Paris-Roubaix back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so all these features were added initially as like ways to make riders faster over cobbles. Those riders are no longer using these frames, but they sort of remain as a selling point. And I think it's still as such a bit of an evolving category in that we've seen many of these features. I mean, the Cannondale one is not something that's suitable for Roubaix. That's just a way to add lights and stuff. But ISO speed, the Synapse, practically at one point, practically every brand had some sort of quasi suspension or something that they were adding to these frames.
And some of them work really well, but
but I think it is evolving in that we will see less and less of this, and even like take the ISO speed for example, it's greatly pared back from what it originally was.
It is, and
it's only at the rear now, whereas it used to be front and rear, and even at the rear it's not adjustable like it used to be, and things like this.
But I've ridden that most recent Domane, and I swear most of the comfort comes from the D-shaped C-post, not from the ISO speed. Like I'm sure there is some flex coming from the ISO speed, and it is providing more, but I'm like, I don't think it's worth the extra complexity here. Like for whatever it is providing, I think there's other bikes that just have rigid frames with a similar D-shaped C-post that are achieving a similar level perceivable comfort.
Well, you said you wouldn't need 40 mil clearance, or some don't need this 40 mil clearance, but I mean, a wider tire is probably going to give you more than a D-shaped C-post or whatever else might. Wider tires, lower pressure, probably you'll feel that more than you will any of these other features.
Yeah. Zach, do you see similar? Like, do you have customers that are no longer as youthful as they once were, that sort of need this more relaxed geometry that feel underserved?
Yeah, for sure. Like a lot of people just want just a road bike that isn't a proper race bike, but don't feel like they want or need suspension or all these things, right? And I feel like all these companies are doing this to kind of stand out from the crowd and differentiate themselves.
For sure.
Like, so that we don't sit here and say, this looks like a tarmac or whatever this looks like a Roubaix or whatever the equivalent on endurance category is, right?
Yeah.
Like for a while on the race side, that was every bike that came out. We were like, it kind of looks like a tarmac. So I think that companies are doing this to kind of differentiate themselves, but also like some people love these things and swear by it and would never buy another bike. But it also puts off a lot of people. Like if they had a Roubaix option with suspension and a Roubaix option without suspension, I guarantee you the without suspension would sell tenfold what the with suspension bike does. But I don't know. They're like so stuck on it and don't want to admit that like maybe actually this isn't the endurance bike that people want. So we're going to go a different route. They just kind of like every generation of Roubaix continues with this, or like ISO speed or whatever the example is, right? It's not just the Roubaix, but
I'm a little bit conflicted here because like I still think done really well, these types of suspension systems can add something, especially for like the roads that I have. Some of the roads that I ride on are just absolutely terrible, and that's driving me to wider tires. Technically speaking, I don't think if we're talking rolling resistance, a wider tire, lower pressure is the fastest setup. And so, could a suspension system done well give me some narrower width and higher pressures in my tires without being too uncomfortable? Possibly, yes. But on the other side, I'm conflicted because Zach, said they don't want everything looking like a tarmac. But if I'm a specialized rider, I want a tarmac SLE, super light endurance. I want like you want, which I think that's like a lot of that customer base
that would have previously been a Roubaix customer went to the Athos because it's like,
which is the wrong bike for them.
Yeah, right. Like it's still pretty aggressive fit, but they're like, okay, this rides nicer. It's not a proper race bike. It's going to be more comfortable for long rides, maybe not as fast, but more comfortable. But the fit is still quite aggressive. So like, I think that, an endurance version of the Tarmac or somewhere in between, I think would be, I don't know, a much more popular bike for the mass of people.
So I think it's probably worth discussing about some of the bikes that do this right and some of the bikes that don't. That serve this category well. And I'm sure people are yelling certain bikes at their headphones or however you're listening at the moment. But yeah, so I mean, one, like there's a couple that come to mind, like the BMC Road Machine was probably an early example of this, like an all-rounder kind of performance leading road bike with a little bit higher stack, and bikes that have followed suit or copied the recipe, like Cervelo Caledonia, pretty close in geometry to that BMC. Now the Giant Defy has gone that way as well. That one is actually a lightweight bike. Those three are bikes that I've recommended to people that, I have personally suggested people get, and they've been really happy with. I'd add the Canyon Endurace to that list as well. And even like that 51 Seeker that I'm testing now, that sort of fits in a similar category. But what I actually find is that even these bikes, like the Caledonia and the Giant Defy, they're actually still kind of aggressive. Like the Giant Defy, the new one, is much more aggressive in geometry than it used to be, like much lower in stack. And if you compare it to the Specialized Roubaix and Trek de Marne, which are incredibly tall in stack, very, very similar approach to geometry, those two bikes. Yeah, all these bikes that exist that I feel like fit the market, like the Caledonia, the BMC, the Giant Defy, they're actually like 3-ish, like in a medium size. They're actually about, off the top of my head, they're about 3 centimeters lower in stack than say a Roubaix or a de Marne. And so yeah, that's where I'm kind of thinking. It's like it's still an underserved market because I still think there are people that need that geometry or would benefit from that geometry that Specialized Roubaix and Trek de Marne do best. But you look at the list of like lightweight road bikes doing that, I'm not seeing them.
There's one example I think that kind of gets the closest, and that's to what I think this category is evolving into, and that's the Dogma X. It's still got that X stay, which is a unique selling feature. Which whatever.
It has the Dogma branding, so it's still
it looks like a Dogma.
Yeah.
But the stack is like you're talking about the Defy. I think for an equivalent size, the Dogma is like 2 centimeters higher than the Defy.
Who would have thought Pinarello is providing the bike I'm looking for?
Yeah, and I've had 40 mil tires in one of those.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, Pinarello is actually serving its, dare I say, aging customer base very well. I don't think that is, I don't think they're going to enjoy me saying that, but it's kind of true. Like it is, the road market is,
Dave,
in a sense.
You've got me in trouble before for saying that.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Trouble's the wrong word, but yeah, I've had to field questions on that comment before.
Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, on my mind with this is like, we've got this gap in the market. Okay, there are some exceptions, like the Pinarello Dogma X is actually an example of sort of what I'm talking about, but I actually think it might be time that we see the industry move back to having multiple geometries in one platform. So I think back to like, maybe it was a decade ago, maybe it wasn't even that long ago, but Trek had its H1 and H2 fits, and all it was like different stack, different reach. You'd get the Madone race bike and you could pick it in the Team Edition, which would be the H1, and they'd have just a few models available, but that would be the aggressive pro fit. And then you'd have the H2, which is kind of like the everyday punter fit. And I actually think you could split those two more widely apart than what Trek had previously done. Have a proper endurance fit in the H2, or call it H2.5, or whatever you want to call it, and then have your pro fit. Why aren't we seeing this?
Do we need pro fit though? Like, do we need pro fit for endurance bikes? Or is
no, but I'm saying have a race bike that, because race bikes are actually really comfortable and well-rounded now. Like model race bikes, you can fit a good tire in. You can be comfortable on like a tarmac, its ride quality is very comfortable on it, but the geometry is wrong for most punters. So I'm just saying like, what if we had a secondary geometry option for the race bike?
And got rid of the endurance bike.
Yeah, at least around here when I'm talking to bike shops, that like they tell me that customers come in and they are trying to say to them, here, look, this Giant Defy or this Domane or this something might be the right bike for you. But, we're seeing on TV that the pros are riding the Madone and they're riding the TCR and they're riding the Propel or whatever it might be, the Tarmac.
Yeah.
And that's what customers want. They want the bike that the pros are riding. And that, Dave, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, where perhaps Trek were just, too early with that concept. But nowadays, if you had a Madone that offered a pro fit, which, rightly or wrongly, the pros do still need, but had a bike that, to the naked eye, without a tape measure, you can't tell the difference. It's just a different geometry. Yeah. I think that's something that would do very well these days.
It's worth noting that a lot of these brands, like Trek and Specialized, for example, they have risen, and I think Cervelo are probably the first to do this, they've risen the stack heights and shortened the reaches on their race bikes in order to make them more saleable to a market that don't race. And I actually think that as a result, you've got these people that are having to do things that are a little outside the realm of what that bike was designed to do in terms of the handlebars they're running or the, removing stem top caps or ridiculous things like that. So I think there's compromises at both ends here, right? Like the bikes they're not tall enough for everyday riders or some everyday riders, and yet they're too tall for pros. And so you're just kind of getting like this, bad for everyone scenario.
Right. And like how many of these bikes do you see rolling around that are just like fully maxed out on spacers and just look horrendous?
Most of them. Yeah.
Particularly all these bikes with the integrated cables, like the headset spacers and stuff are like way bigger than what they used to be. So it looks even worse. So if you could say, okay, you want this race bike, but your position is this. So we're going to do this race bike, but the front end is 3 centimeters taller and it doesn't have to look terrible.
Exactly.
And I think that would be way better.
You're getting to my main issue with the UCI's commercialization rule right now, and that I think it is great that we can buy the Tour de France winning bike, whatever. I've written that in an article I was doing. It should be published later this week, and I've written that many times in the past. But the downside of that is that manufacturers are having to develop bikes that are suitable for both the best in the world and everyday riders. And as such, there are going to be compromises in one direction or the other. Either the pros are like, the example I always give is that you can't tell me the bike that's developed for Tom Pidcock is just as good for my dad, who
but like
are
someone
around about the same height, but
not pros, but like someone like you or me still want and need that fit. So like that bike still has to exist, right? So I think what the broader picture is that like the bike companies right now are primarily missing the mark on the endurance category of like that, I guess, aging road rider category. It's like that bike doesn't exist for them.
I would say they're missing the mark on where the money is in road. In people that want to just do pure road, they're not interested in buying a bike that they want to go, for gravel or all round. They just want a pure road bike that fits them, and they want it to be light, and they want it to feel like the race bike they used to ride. I think the industry is missing the mark in that category.
Because so many of these bikes, they like marketing as, you can put a small gravel tire on it and take it out on a gravel ride. Like, not everyone wants to do that. A lot of people don't want to do that. They just want to go for a proper road ride or have like an actual dedicated gravel bike. They don't want this one bike that can kind of do everything but not feel like a proper road bike anymore.
I think there's a bigger problem with the marketing than even just that, Zach, and that it again gets back to the fact that a lot of the marketing of these road bikes is done through the pro teams. And, it's, this
always has been. Yeah.
This is developed for Julian Alaphilippe, and here's why it'll make you faster. And it's like, no, it'll just make you feel worse on your ride.
But so many people too, though, like, I guess maybe it is the marketing working, but like they want to believe that like this bike is going to make me faster. Even if it feels worse, it's still going to be faster because it's more aero and it's lighter weight. Like they don't want to be told, hey, actually, you're not fast anymore. Like you need to recognize that, like buy this slower bike. Like, no, you want to feel fast.
Yeah. You know what would work for me as far as like inspiring me to not buy a race bike is like Cadell Evans 25 kilos heavier than he is now with 200 less average watts and riding an endurance road bike and just being, yep, I've decided this is the bike for me. I'm like, this is now speaking to me.
Yeah.
This is the marketing I want. Of course I'm kidding, but it's just I don't know. I think you're completely right. The brands in the road sector have always used professional racing to sell bikes. And as a result of that, people don't want to buy the endurance road bikes, even though it's the best thing for them. So let's just give them the best thing for them without calling it an endurance road bike.
Right, but it's interesting because for a while, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, the endurance, that was the segment that was the like selling the most, like the Synapses and the Roubaix and stuff, and the Domanes. And then somewhere along the line, they started adding all these features, and then the sales figures dropped. So
made them heavy and expensive and slow feeling.
Yeah, so it seems really easy to kind of put A and B together and figure out, okay, this is where we went wrong, instead of making this like a slightly more relaxed, slightly bigger tire clearance bike. We've added suspension and all these other things, and like our sales figures dropped.
I mean, we could talk about this all day, but you know, if there's one hurdle I see for riders who maybe would consider an endurance bike, it's kind of the opposite of the effect that brands want with the marketing of their pro bikes, and that if the Tarmac SL8 or the TCR or the Propel, whatever it is marketed as, here's our fastest bike, the perceived implication is that the endurance bike is much slower. And what I hear when I'm trying to convince people to go for an endurance bike is that, oh, aren't endurance bikes slow? I'm going to get dropped. I need something that's faster so that I can keep up better. I don't know how you can say your fastest bike is your fastest without saying your other bikes are slower, but if we could maybe just convey the message a bit better that speed is also about being
put some
less
wheels on
fatigued
it
at the end of a ride. Yeah. If you're getting dropped towards the end of the ride and it's, you know, your back's aching, and that's maybe if your back wasn't aching because you're in a more achievable, sustainable position, perhaps that would add to not getting dropped. I don't know, but yeah.
There's performance and comfort.
Yeah. It's very difficult to measure, and that's why we very rarely see it as a marketing thing, but it's also very real.
Yeah. So anyway, I think some bikes are close, but and as you say, that Pinarello is pretty good. I think Giant Defy with an extra 2 centimeters of stack would be exactly the sort of bike I'm talking about. I think, there's many brands that are close to this, but I still see it as an underserved market. So, all right, well, let's move on to a PSA for this week. Comes from We're All Cycle Services, and it's off the back of a previous Ask a Wrench, and I think it might actually be something we've spoken about quite recently, and I apologize if we even called it a PSA, but it's probably worth repeating. But it's, your composite-bodied road pedals do wear out, so just keep an eye on that. Zach, Ronan, any thoughts on what people should look out for with this?
I mean, usually it is a bit visual. You can kind of see, like, say, the toe piece or where the cleat kind of clips on the back, like some visual wear marks there. But also a good test is like you put new cleats on and it's still a lot of slop, more so than it should be. So
toggle, where the shoe
That's the word.
Floats, not normal side to side float, but sort of floats on off axis, I guess. Sort of the shoe tilts in the pedal, I guess, is one sign for me. But Ronan, any thoughts on this? You strike me as someone that actually would wear out pedals.
Toggle and wobble. If you've got wobble in your cleat interface, then I mean, the new Wahoo speed plays did resolve this a bit, but if you've got older speed plays, given how long those Wahoo speed plays have been about now, you probably have some wear and.
Yeah, so and like in addition to speed play, like I'd say it's pretty common with Shimano, and Shimano, like their bearings are so durable that you do actually get to a point where the pedal body will die or like will get worn and be causing problems. And I think other systems like Look, in my experience, I'd say typically the bearings are the thing that you notice first before the pedal body itself wears. So different systems have different strengths, but certainly like Speedplay and Shimano, keep a close eye out for old Speedplay.
Eventually it's a safety thing too, like you'll pull out of the pedal very easily and can crash, and that's not good.
I do think is ways to avoid this, like just if you're using a road system and just trying to keep it clean, grit and dirt and gravel and whatever other sort of road debris stuck between your cleat and your pedal, hopefully would wear your cleat first, but it will not be helping your pedal either.
Well, there you go, a PSA. One we've probably said before, but that's the thing with PSAs, they're always worth repeating. All right, well, I think it's time for us to get to quick tech bites. We've got some new things to talk about. A lot of it is off-road leaning this week. There is one bit of road tech to discuss, which is a new bike. But for this, I'm going to jump to a little conversation I've already had with our newest recruit at Escape Collective, Josh Weinberg, who joined us from the Radavist. And Josh is, our boots on the ground in the USA from a tech point of view. And he's been busy driving around, most recently at the Mid-South Gravel Race. So let's hear that. Josh Weinberg, first time on the Geek Warning podcast, surely not the last. Welcome.
Thanks, Dave.
How you been? You've been traveling around, a little bit of smoke inhalation, I believe, and how have things been the last few days?
Interesting to say the least. I was at the Mid-South endurance weekend, which it's called now because it includes some running distances. The day before the big gravel bike race, and the runs happened for the most part on would have been Friday, and then that evening, heavy winds broke out across the area in Oklahoma that the race is held in, Stillwater, Oklahoma, and caused wildfires to ignite, which then caused the cancellation of the race. So we were there kind of witnessing it all in the midst of it, kind of wondering what was happening for hours as there was just questions about whether the race could go on and emergency responses and all of that kind of stuff. So quite an interesting weekend, unfortunate as well because of the damage that took place. But, we reported on some really interesting and uplifting community events or instances of community resiliency. So some cool stories that came out of it too.
Yeah, nice. I mean that's on Escape Collective now, and within that you had some tech as well, which some pro bike stuff there. Were there any new bikes that you saw under pro riders or not pro riders that sort of stood out to you?
Yeah, I didn't notice any new bikes. There was I think it's maybe it was a little early in the season to see that, or they were disguised well enough that I didn't notice it. But definitely some tech there. Like we've reported in the past in this podcast, the new Zip wheels that Sarah Stern was running with the integrated tire pressure sensors, that was kind of interesting to see in person. Some prototype tires. Alexei Vermeulen had a 50 mil Kenda tire that was kind of like a knobby sidewall with a smoother tread in the middle. He's run that before, but still no name on it, and it's not for sale yet. So that was another one. And then Chase Work had that head rear disc wheel that's gotten a lot of comments on the piece on the site and on Instagram too. People kind of interested in what a disc wheel is doing in a gravel race. So he'll probably have that again this year. So
yeah, especially when combined with the front wheel that has bird spokes, which are not aero. So anyway, there's definitely some interesting stuff all in that gallery that you posted. Another thing, I guess, that probably brings us to the quick tech bites of this segment, which is let's start with what you saw at Mid-South before the whole before everyone packed up their tents and started to head home. But one was Teravail has some new things. So
all right, Teravail has a complete wheel set available now. This is the first wheel that they've done. They've been known as a tire brand, selling quite a few different varieties of tire from road to mountain to gravel, all under the QBP umbrella, along with Surly and All City and all of those other well-known QBP brands. And this is their first wheel. Interestingly, they're saying that it's not developed under the Whiskey Parts brand, which is QBP's like carbon parts brand. They've been doing forks and wheel seat posts in carbon for quite a while, but this was done totally within the Teravail team. So interesting there. 25 millimeter internal width on that for modern quote unquote gravel tires in that 40 to 50 mil range. And then they came out with a completely new tire name, or tire model, I guess, that is available in 4 different sizes. It's called the Updraft, and it comes in, anywhere from 40 to 50 millimeters.
Okay. What sort of tread pattern is that?
It's actually kind of similar to what I was describing about that Kenda that Alexi has. So it's got these, they call it a file tread in the center that looks like sort of low profile directional strips that are surrounded by shoulder lugs. So it's kind of like,
gotcha.
Imagine like fast rolling center with treadier, grippier side lugs.
Yeah, where a lot of gravel tires have been heading lately. So I mean it is quite interesting. Like QBP, as you mentioned, massive in the US. A lot of bike shops have accounts with them. They're a major distributor that also sells bike shops like SRAM and Shimano, for example. But then they also have their own house brands, Teravail being one of them. And it's interesting to see like a complete wheel package. Like they're doing their own valves, their own rims, tires. It's I guess it'll be interesting to see how this expands out given all the tires they offer. You can imagine that they'd probably do more than just one wheel set with time. So anyway, one to watch. Seems like a good value pick and one that's built around a trusted DT Swiss 350 hub. So speaking of new wheels, another one out of the US, Chris King is now doing an alloy mountain bike wheel set. It's first time, not ever, but first time in a while we've seen Chris King do a new alloy rimmed wheel set. Yeah, I mean, what are some key details in this thing?
Yeah, I mean, especially with their own branding and a wheel set that's made specific for them, I think it's obviously reminiscent of the Fusion Fiber wheels that they've had for a while now. They have that deeper aero wheel, they have a gravel wheel and a mountain wheel. All, you can buy them individually or as a set with, of course, the famous Chris King hubs. But these are quite a bit lower price, being aluminum. I think they're $1,250 for the set. So pretty competitive pricing when you think about the hub that's on there and what the Chris King hub costs, what they cost alone. 30 millimeter internal rim width. So pretty good size mountain bike rim there. And the wheels are made in the US specifically for Chris King. So just again, like their composite wheels made in the US. They're not saying who's making them, but there's only a few alloy wheel manufacturers here in the US that I know of. So it's most likely one of them.
Yeah, probably one of, I think there's 3 prominent manufacturers of alloy rims in the US, and there's probably it's got to be one of 3 of them, you'd imagine. But I guess for now it's just a more trail focused wheel, so it's a little bit over 2,000 grams claimed for that wheel set. But I think that price point is pretty interesting, and I think it'd be interesting to see if they end up doing like a lighter, more XE version, or whether it just stays at that trail. But as you said, pretty good value for given what's at the center of those things. It's not a huge price increase over just a hub set alone. So
but hopefully it'll lower the barrier to entry to getting into a Chris King hub set for the folks that want them. I think with their composite wheels, they did start with a mountain wheel and then roll out a gravel and then a road or all road wheel, whatever you want to call that, the ARD wheel. So maybe we'll see them do that again with these.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, well, they build a good wheel. So probably the biggest news for now, as far as the tech stuff goes, you spent some time with Fox suspension a few weeks ago, and they've got the Fox 34 SL, which replaces both the standard 34 fork and the 34 step cast. I mean, what are some details of this thing? Yeah,
so I think the biggest thing is it's more of a, I would say a replacement of the what's been called the step cast fork. That will totally go away. And now this 34 SL comes in 3 different travel options. So 110, 120, and 130. The 130 is new. That's Fox hasn't offered that in anything. They had it in the regular 34 previously, but not in something that's more like XC or down country focused. So it's kind of the big thing is like a a more capable fork for more capable cross country and down country bikes up into that 130 mil travel range, but still, claimed weights of being lighter than any of their competitors' forks that only go up to 120 mil travel in this range. So
the most logical competitor would be like the RockShox Sid Ultimate,
that's right,
which is like a 35 mil stanchion fork
right.
that only goes up to 120 mil travel.
Yep.
But yeah, this Fox is like sub 1500 grams. And yeah, it looks really good. I mean, you've been riding one a little bit. You've written about it on Escape Collective, which your riding would have just gone up as we're talking about this. But yeah, I mean, early ride impressions. You've only had it a couple of weeks. You've probably only had a few rides on it, but yeah, early thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's great. I went with like the fork I was riding on this bike previously that I actually had in the review of the Sour Cowboy Cookie last week or 2 weeks ago now. I can't even remember.
Mm-hmm.
I had the RockShox Pike Ultimate on that bike for a while, quite a bit heavier fork than the Fox 34, so but the same amount of travel. So they offered that down to a 130, thicker stanchions on that fork. It feels like a much kind of burlier and stiff fork, but it's quite heavy. So shaving a lot of weight in the front, I think we're like 400 grams or something lighter in the Fox 34 SL than the Pike that I was using before. It just makes the bike feel completely different in terms of like just maneuverability and just kind of like moving it around. The thing I will say is that the thinner stanchions, you can kind of feel that maybe they're a little bit more flexible than like in the Pike. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they feel kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say like compliant because that's probably not really a thing when you're talking about, side loading
it can be.
And things like that. But
yeah,
but it does feel a lot different there. But the big thing is being able to get a 130 millimeter fork in, something that weighs 400 grams less than like the RockShox Pike, or even, still less than like what the 120 millimeter travel weighs in with the more comparable fork in the Sid Ultimate. So
yeah, it definitely fills a gap in the market that exists. Yeah, like a 130 mil travel XC fork that you can trail ride with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're seeing like some, more XC riders want longer travel for the more demanding courses that they're riding these days. And I think we're seeing that in some of the bikes that are coming out too. We're seeing them spec'd with longer travel forks. So, this one's it's not being released in a vacuum. Like there's a definite demand and use case for this fork. So it's kind of interesting to see where this segment of bike is going to go with a fork like this. And it's also going to be interesting to see what RockShox does now that this Fox is on the market and, longer travel, lighter weight.
Yeah. And there's absolutely there's consumer demand for these things. There's also OE demand. Like if you look at say Specialized Epic Evo is one bike that comes to mind. That comes stock with a 130 mil travel fork on the front of it. And it's like a, sub 2000 gram XE race frame set. So yeah, up until now, they haven't really had like the perfect lightweight fork to put on that bike. But yeah, I do think, and I do agree with you. It's definitely a category we're going to see become very popular. That sort of lightweight 130 fork. So, all right, interesting one. I'll head to Escape Collective to read more about it, including a little bit of coverage of the new remote that comes with that fork. But
oh yeah, that one's interesting too. You want to touch on that just really quick?
Sure, we can touch on that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, basically it replaces the old Fox remote lockout lever, but it does it in a way that also incorporates a dropper lever. So before, I believe you had the lockout remote, which was kind of like a the 2 or 3 position control, but then you would have to have a separate dropper lever or remote to the side of that. So the cockpits that use that lockout were kind of like a little bit I don't know,
Clunky.
Clunky, messy. I don't know. A little bit harder to use when you're like, moving your thumb around so much, especially in a race environment. This one just kind of consolidates it all into one.
We can say it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think it's an upgrade from what they had before. It's cool to see that dropper lever in there. Dropper levers are kind of like mechanical dropper levers or remotes, whatever you want to call them, are, you can develop a personal preference for one now that there's like so many different options out there in the market. So you're kind of locked into Fox's remote there for the dropper integrated into this overall control. But if I've been on it for a couple of days now. I haven't had it very long. I'll share more thoughts, in time with that, but it feels really nice. I mean, the operation's like smooth and snappy, and the lockout's really interesting. Yeah, it's great.
How does it work? Because like when you tell me it's like dropper and suspension remote all in one, I think of like the Scott Addict remote, which is like has many buttons and looks very clunky.
Oh yeah.
But this thing looks like it only has 2 buttons. Is that correct?
There's 2 buttons, and it relies on ramps and catches to both actuate and then release. So it's kind of like, one push engage, one push release. And then below those 2 buttons is an integrated dropper lever. So that's essentially a third lever on the unit.
Okay.
And it's just kind of like all right there.
Okay, all right, but it does looking at the photos, it does look like it's more compact than the Scott version that predates it.
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, new fork, new lockout lever. Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, I think this is an interesting trend for mountain biking in general, and there's some cool tech here. So yeah, head to Escape Collective, check out Josh's write up on the things. As usual, fantastic photos. On that, let's head to the final bit of quick tech bite that we have for the week, which is LiteSpeed has, I'm not going to say gone back to its roots, but they've definitely returned to doing something that they were once very well known for, which is incredibly lightweight titanium. So it was many years ago, I think it was the Gasallo was a sub 1,000 gram rim brake titanium road frame, incredibly lightweight at the time. And yeah, LiteSpeed have come back with something similar, the Col dels Reis. I'm sure I just butchered the name of that, but yeah, it's hitting under 1,000 grams for a disc brake titanium road frame. It's not cheap, not by any means. You're looking at $6,500 for a frame set. Bike starting from $16,500. It is light, I'll give them that. So yeah, it's exactly 948 grams for a medium, but that's with their SL dropout and anodized head tube graphic, and also a English shaded bottom bracket. The weight would go up to 1,050 grams if you added a UDH dropout and a T47 bottom bracket, for example. The other thing to keep in mind with this frame, 85 kilogram rider weight limit. So it's light, but for many people, I think it might be too light. But yeah, I don't know. It's cool to see other materials sort of trying to take on the attractiveness of carbon frames at this high end. I think one of the issues that like the titanium market has had is that it's pretty fun to have an 800 gram frame and build up like a 6.5 kilo disc brake bike, and that's pretty tough to do with a lot of titanium frames. So I think this is where LiteSpeed's perhaps thinking in this realm. But yeah, be interesting to see how it rides.
I'd love to know more about this bike and how it's built, what kind of tubing they're used to get it, get the tubing thin enough yet strong enough, even with that rider weight.
It's got some shape to it, that's for sure. Yeah,
it'll be interesting. Hopefully there's one at Sea Otter that we can check out and maybe
that'd be cool. Yeah, a lot of the tubes appear to be formed into almost like diamond shapes to, I guess, give stiffness where the material thickness lacks. But yeah, it's no 3D printed pieces in this as well, which is interesting. Wow. I think they looked into that and found that would actually be a heavier alternative. So
I think that's usually the case.
Traditional, old school. Yes. So, but yeah, it looks nice. I'll give them that. It's cool. So yeah, the next nearest competitor looks to be like a 7 cycles Axiom XX, and that's closer to 1,200 grams. So yeah, this thing is light. Anyway, well, that's the quick tech bites. Josh, good to catch up. Good to get you on the podcast. Let's aim to do this again, perhaps with something new next week.
It seems like there's always something new every week, Dave.
It does. So, there's I won't tease it too. No, I'll tease it a lot. There's something big coming next week, so we'll. I think you and I will probably discuss it because we'll both have our hands on it by then.
Yeah, I'll work on my podcast voice between now and then.
Sweet, sounds good. Nice, sounds good. All right, we'll catch you soon. All right. Well, yeah, Josh, expect to hear Josh from time to time on the podcast. We'll certainly have his voice back on in the near future. But for now, it is time to get to Ask a Wrench. And for those that are new to the podcast or have missed a few episodes, Ask a Wrench is now behind our paywall. It is now member only. If you want to listen to Ask a Wrench, you'll need to be on our member only feeds of the podcast. You'll be a subscriber to Escape Collective, and from there you would head to escapecollective.com and you'd log in and then head to the podcast page, and from there you'll find some very quick, easy steps on how to get sent a link, which would then put the podcast permanently into your preferred podcast app. It only takes a couple of minutes to do, very easy, and I will give a shout out that one benefit in being a member of Escape Collective is that it gains you access to our Everything podcast feed. So we do have one feed where all of our podcasts go into. It's almost daily, I think, Ronan, that we publish podcasts at this point.
We take Sundays off.
Sundays are off. Okay. Almost daily. We have a lot of podcasts, and that being a member allows you to join that feed, but you can also just join specific feeds. We have a specific member-only feed for Geek Warning. We also have a specific member-only feed for your podcast, Ronan, Performance Process, which is now every week diving into the things that make us better cyclists.
Yes, and this week diving into the things that we are told make us better cyclists and how to decipher aero claims from manufacturers. And how to call BS.
Right. Huh. Interesting. All right. That sounds worth jumping into. Well, there you have it. If you want to become a member, head to escapecollective.com/join. If you're not becoming a member, then just know that we're about to answer some questions from members related to a leaking new Shimano road brake lever. We've got another question about sealed cartridge bearings on bikes, the type that use the sort of polymer infield bearings. Another question related to, removing stubborn tubeless valves out on the road. So, that's the sort of stuff that you're missing out on this week and every other week. Let's jump to it.